Hey everybody, welcome back to Video So Terka, and somehow another month has gone by from the December news update. It is now the end of January, the Christmas trees are down, but MiSTer has had another awesome month, so I'm going to recap everything that's happened that you need to know about for the month of January. A big thanks to the Thursday video sponsor, MiSTer Add-ons. I've been using his hardware on the channel since the beginning, and even though he doesn't love Escape from New York as much as I do, he still makes some really great hardware you should try. But one of the big new updates for January is FPGAZumSpass has updated the Nintendo 64 core many times, and he has brought LOD or level of detail implementations into the FPGA code. That is what you see when Peach turns into Bowser here. It's a little bit of hardware trickery using level of detail for a way that it was never really intended on being used. But as we go through the intro to Perfect Dark here and you look at the buildings, you're going to see different textures depending on whether or not level of detail is on or off. Now this is something that the hardware could do inherently, so having it added to the Nintendo 64 core is awesome. This core is shaping up so well in January. A ton of bug fixes, a ton of different games now rendering more graphics or working better, and all of this LOD you can see there in the buildings as they go from pixelated to sharp. If we take a look at Banjo here, as you turn the level of detail toggle on or off, you're going to see such fundamental differences in the overall texture detail and what you see in the world in and of itself. Now the core already looks spectacular without level of detail implemented, but it is a hardware feature that Nintendo 64 could support, so of course Robert is going to incorporate it into the core. And we've had like 5 new cores in January as of the recording of this video. I'm doing this the day before you're watching it, so it's very likely that there's already another core out and you never know what's going to happen. And recently there's been some RDP fixes as well. It used to be in the intro to Mischief Makers, when you threw these 5 enemies in the intro, those boulders would not show up at all. They are now here, and in level 4.1, which I discussed in a previous video, check my playlist, this boulder would be completely invisible. You could not see it whatsoever. You could still play the level, but you were missing an entire graphical element. That has all been fixed up, but really the big takeaway for Nintendo 64 so far in January is the level of detail implementation. It is so fundamentally important to so many games, and it seems like Rare utilized it the most. So if you haven't updated your Nintendo 64 core recently, make sure you grab the newest one. It'll have all the RDP bug fixes in it, as well as LOD textures. Original is on for real hardware, off is going to be them not being used whatsoever. But Nintendo 64 had an awesome January. I can't wait to see what happens in February. And speaking of awesome Januaries, SRG 320 has updated the Sega Saturn core multiple times after not updating it since October of last year. If you are on Update All and you're using the most recent Update All core, do be aware you're not getting these new updates. They are in unstable nightlies in the MiSTer FPGA Discord server. But SRG 320 has let everyone know he's relocated from where he was before, and now it seems like he's in a situation where he's much more freely available to work, considering he was in Ukraine. But there have been so many awesome updates to the Sega Saturn core. So many games have been fixed or made to work. Something like Sega Rally here, it was impossible to play the 2-player mode before. Now with the most recent cores, you can 100% have a 2-player match, have the 2 screens rendering 2 completely different things at the same time, and it just works very close to what real hardware would do. And there's been so many other updates. Now Die Hard Arcade, which used to have audio for like 2 seconds and it would drop out, is going to have a full soundtrack as well as the sound effects. Sega Saturn is shaping up really well in January, and I can't wait to see what the rest of the year brings. Some of these games just feel like they're playing on real hardware, other ones definitely have some bugs, but SRG 320 has been going through bug reports on GitHub and closing some of those tickets out with new cores that seem to fix all of the issues that people have been listing on there. So if you are testing the Sega Saturn core and you notice bugs, go over to the GitHub page and look at the open issues. If you don't see the bug that you have noticed, provide some evidence for it, video captures, screenshots, or otherwise. That way SRG 320 knows where it is, because it seems like he's paying very close attention to those issue tickets and is solving some of the bugs in the core going down the line what's there. But there's been so many improvements in January, but the best part is that SRG 320 is just able to work. His safety means way more than any sort of Sega Saturn FPGA core we could ever play, and that is always great news. But the added bonus of that is that we do get new updates on the Sega Saturn side. Stuff like Sonic Jam here, the 3D world has been improved, and if we move over to Daytona USA, this is another game where the audio would almost basically drop out within like the first 3 to 5 seconds. Now you have a full soundtrack for this game. It's a little bit quiet, but it does work, and it has one of the best Sega soundtracks of all time, so honestly, even if you have to turn the volume up, it is so much better than previous cores. And that's just a great thing. It seems to be all across the board, games are seeing a lot of improvements. Some games like Fighting Vipers here have a little bit less slowdown. Other games are seeing visual improvements. It's definitely different depending on what game you test, but pretty much everything in those patch notes is getting updated, and I can't wait to see what the next core brings us, because there are still some games that aren't playable on the core, and some games I wouldn't recommend playing because you can't finish them. But something like Darius Gaiden here, you can play it from start to finish, see the credits roll, and have an absolute blast of a time, and there's no problem with that. Now we also got Direct Video 1 mode around like late December to early January. It was kind of updated a few times, and this allows us to send metadata from the MiSTer FPGA over to the RetroTink 4K. Now I understand this is going to be an uncommon configuration at this point in time. There's not many RetroTink 4Ks out in the world, but this is going to allow you to send that data from MiSTer FPGA over HDMI so you can get an analog video signal out, as well as give the RetroTink all of the metadata about what the core is trying to do. I did a video on this, I'll leave a link in the description below, but playing around with MiSTer in 4K over direct video mode has made MiSTer feel brand new again in some ways. And as the RetroTink 4K stock kind of normalizes more, hopefully in the future, more of you are definitely going to want to check this out. But it's awesome that this was able to be done in the first place. There was requests on GitHub to make this happen, and the people that know how to do it got it done, and now you can get direct video out of your MiSTer FPGA with metadata into the RetroTink and just start scaling things to 4K. And pretty much across every single core I have tested this with, it looks absolutely spectacular, because the MiSTer can get to 1440p, but it can't go to 4K, so pairing it with the RetroTink has been an absolute ton of fun. And if you want to see more stuff like this in the future, just leave me a comment down below, and if there's any MiSTer video I haven't done that you are curious about, leave me that comment as well. I do take your guys' feedback into account when I play around with stuff like this, so if there's something I haven't shown you yet or haven't taught you how to do yet that you want to see, definitely give me that information. But if you want to pick up RetroTink 4K, trust me, it pairs perfectly with MiSTer. Now moving over to the arcade side, Pramod released an alpha core for Midway Williams Y system hardware, and it comes with 2 playable games. Unfortunately, it seems like this might be the culmination of what is possible on MiSTer FPGA. This is the board that runs Mortal Kombat, and while it does technically run, it is not running well, and that just seems to be down to a RAM issue on MiSTer FPGA. But it is still fun to check out, and you never know what could happen in the future. He has mentioned that he may come in and add a sound module, because right now Smash TV and the other games that do work do not have any audio on them whatsoever. It's basically not incorporated in the code. And you'll see here as you get to Mortal Kombat, it is running, but there's definitely some graphical glitches. So hopefully maybe something can be done in the future, but that'll be left to be seen. But the 2 games that do work on the core are awesome. Total Carnage and Smash TV are a ton of fun, and hopefully if we can get audio in them, we're going to get at least a partial of the Williams Midway Y core on MiSTer FPGA. Now I admit to not being the biggest Mortal Kombat fan in the world. I think Mortal Kombat 2 is the better game, but I know a lot of you love it, and you were excited to see some progress be made towards that. I don't know where this is going to go again in the future, maybe nothing whatsoever. We will just have to wait and see, but it was one of the things that happened on the arcade side that had been talked about and previewed a lot in 2023, and we ended up getting it in the beginning of 2024. And even if you can't play with audio right now, the 2 games that do work are a ton of fun. Maybe just hum to yourself in the background. But you'll see here as we move to another game, that RAM issue is putting up graphical glitches, the BRAM, and that is unfortunate. Hopefully maybe in the future something can be figured out, or when MiSTer 2 or another FPGA platform comes around, it would work. But what is here is fun. I would definitely say this is obviously not arcade perfect down to the hardware limitations, but check it out and see what's going on with this core, because the 2 games that do work are some of the best on the board, so hey, at least you get that sort of thing. And tell me down below what's the one arcade board you'd love to see come to MiSTer that's not here yet, because I would be curious. Now do be aware, Update All has also been updated to a 2.1 version. You don't need to do anything to install this. If you run Update All 2.0, it should automatically update itself. It changes some of the menu structure around, it adds some new features, and it kind of streamlines the entire process, because there's so many toggleable options on MiSTer FPGA. Sometimes you could get buried in a sea of abilities to do different things. So I have played around with this, I have checked it out, and there's a great new menu structure, as well as different repositories that you can play play around with now. And who doesn't like new options and new databases and new menu structures? I will say this definitely streamlines up update all, so if you haven't run it in a little bit, definitely make sure you do so. It should automatically update itself to 2.1 and you'll be off to the races on that one. Now I will have a video next week about different controller options for the Nintendo 64 core. You guys have been asking me a lot about what the best controller is, and there's a lot of new things on the market, a lot of existing things on the market that are going to allow you to have a really fun time with original controls as well as new controls. So I will have that video next week, because I know a lot of you have been curious about that. Because the Nintendo 64 core is probably the most popular thing on MiSTer FPGA lately, it has been a very big question in the comments. You can always leave me questions, I'm happy to answer them, but there are a ton of different ways to play around with real controllers, and I'm going to be talking about all of those next week. And if you want a new 2024 controller guide across the entirety of MiSTer, let me know down below. I've been thinking about doing it, but I want to see if the demand's out there. But you have so many different options, stuff like Reflex Adapt here from MiSTer add-ons. It is such a fun way to play on Nintendo 64 hardware. And speaking of MiSTer add-ons, he's going to soon start selling new I/O boards, both for dual RAM as well as single RAM variants. They're going to have a Saturn RGB AV jack on them, which is going to be different than what you're used to with the VGA style port. They're not available yet, but when they do become available, I will definitely do some reviews on both of these. They're going to improve video out and add a lot more functionality to the I/O. And you can take a look at his page here. I'll leave a link in the description below. You can go over all of the different features, what's going to change. So when those are available, I'll definitely let you know, probably on Twitter, as will MiSTer add-ons, I'm sure, and we'll definitely take a look at it when they're ready. But the biggest update for me in January is SRG320's ability to continually update the Sega Saturn core. I don't care as much about the updates as I do about his ability to actually do the updates in and of themselves, and I can't wait to see what comes to Sega Saturn next month as well. It seems like SRG320 and FPGAZumSpass are racing to release new cores, and it's been so much fun to cover them all, and I can't wait to see what comes next. But that's the news for January on the MiSTer FPGA front. It's been another awesome month, and it's been a great start to 2024. And we got 11 more months to go until we get to the next year, and trust me, you're going to be getting 11 more news episodes. But short of that, if you have any questions or comments, leave them down below. And if you have any ideas for MiSTer videos that I haven't done yet, do that as well, because I do love hearing you guys' feedback. But short of that, go update your MiSTers, add the new Nintendo 64 core, the Sega Saturn core, run update all, and you're going to be having a ton of fun. See you guys next time. Bye-bye.